Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Lucinda Vacura. I'm the Business Development and Marketing Director with the Alford Group. And I know many of you are familiar with our firm, but for those of you who are not, the Alford Group is a national full-service consulting firm specializing in the nonprofit and social sectors. So we offer services in fundraising, strategic planning, corporate partnership strategy, data analytics, and much more. Our goal is to provide guidance, tools, and structures that really empower organizations to have the greatest impact possible. Of course, there's more information about the Alford Group on our website, which is alford.com. On behalf of the entire team, welcome to our second webinar in our 40th anniversary webinar series. There are 2 more webinars in this series. All of these webinars are free and are posted on our website. So I'll speak to that more at the end of today's presentation. So today's webinar is titled Fundraising Campaigns, the 4 Things You Need to Reach Your Goal. And leading us through today's conversations are my colleagues Karen Rotko-Wynn, Executive Vice President, and Alexis Cooke, Consultant, both here at the Alford Group. Karen brings 30 years of experience running fundraising campaigns and working on development teams. In her time with the Alford Group, she has worked with more than 70 different nonprofits, offering her expertise on major gifts, organizational development, feasibility studies, and campaigns. Alexis has dedicated her career to the nonprofit sector, holding multiple leadership positions in development departments for organizations such as the Music Institute of Chicago, the Adler Planetarium, and the Chicago Botanic Garden. She uses her expertise in fundraising campaigns, board relations, and development operations to counsel clients across the country. Before we dig in, I have just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is approved for 1 CFRE credit point for those of you who are seeking CFRE certification or recertification. The webinar is being recorded and will have a recording available for you after the event along with the slides. And please look out for an email later with both of these, the recording and the slides, as well as a short survey asking for your feedback on how we did today. Everyone joining us is in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. We will have time at the end of our presentation to take questions. So if you have a question at any time during the webinar, please simply type your question using the chat function. So there's a Q&A icon on your screen, and you can chat questions there, and we will get to as many questions as possible during the Q&A section at the end. And lastly, we invite you to join us on Twitter throughout the webinar using the hashtag NPOStrength, which you can see here down in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. We will be live tweeting and invite you to join the conversation there as well. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Karen to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Lucinda. Alexis and I are very pleased to be here with you today and excited to present our second webinar in this series with the Alford Group. Our focus today is to provide you with insight and tools to ensure that you are successful with 4 fundamentals that you will need to reach your major gifts goal. Today, we're going to begin with a campaign overview, then we will delve into these 4 fundamentals, and then we will allow for questions at the end. So first, we're going to begin with a campaign overview. If you attended last week's feasibility study webinar, this may be a familiar graphic. The graphic is particularly important to understand if you're planning a major capital campaign. The first thing that needs to be solidly in place is that your organization has been through a strategic planning process and has a clearly defined strategic priority. A preliminary goal is set and it's approved and endorsed by your board of directors. Third, the case for support is developed. Why philanthropy? Why is your project important? What are the benefits to society, organizational competence? What problem is there that you are solving? And we're going to delve into this more deeply in a moment. Fourth, a campaign feasibility or planning study is conducted in order to ensure that the need is seen by your constituents as an important part of achieving your mission and that the campaign goal is achievable. And for those of you who were lucky enough to be on the session last week with my colleagues Wendy Hatch and Amy Hines, you were able to really delve into a planning and feasibility study. Next, we're ready to begin the campaign planning and lead gifts phase of a campaign, where the 4 fundamentals truly need to be in place so that you will achieve at least half of your goal within the first 9 to 12 months. Next, during a major capital campaign, we would have the campaign major gifts phase, where volunteer leadership and constituencies are expanded, major gifts are secured, and within the next, say, 12 to 18 months, the campaign will have achieved 70 to 85% of its goal. And then finally, the public phase, or the community phase, as we call it, is where we would publicly announce a major campaign, hold kickoff events, conclude any outstanding solicitations, make presentations to community groups, and all kinds of community outreach that are connected to the very final phase of the campaign, which is really only perhaps 4 to a maximum of 9 months, at which time you would reach 100% of your goal. And finally, the vision is realized. And so thank you for the lovely graphic, Lucinda and Alexis. So next I want to talk about how we define a campaign. Today's session is about the 4 things you need to reach your goal, but we recognize that there are several kinds of organization or several kinds of campaigns that your organization may be considering. They take all shapes and sizes. The key definition is that it is a special and intensive fundraising effort that's directed at achieving specific goals within a specified time period. So this can take the form of a capital campaign, which I think many of you might be considering or might be in. It could also take the form of a special program or project campaign, an effort to build endowment or a special fund for sustainability. It could be a comprehensive campaign or an integrated campaign, perhaps, to raise funds for multiple purposes, or establishing a major gift program for your annual fund. All of these types of campaigns are going to be able to utilize the 4 fundamentals that we are going to go over with you today. So now I'm going to ask Lucinda to take a quick poll from our audience.
Sure, of course. So this is a fun real-time poll that we're going to do for everybody, addressing exactly what Karen just talked about. So what type of campaign are you currently planning or implementing? So you might be in the planning stages, you might be in the middle of a campaign, but just curious, out of everyone who's on the line, what types of campaigns that we're currently looking at. So I'm watching everybody vote, which is really fun, and I'll leave this open for another 10 seconds or so everyone gets the opportunity to cast a vote. So either a capital campaign, program special projects, endowment, comprehensive or integrated major gifts program for an annual campaign. Okay, just a couple more seconds and I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Okay, I'm sharing the results.
Okay.
Board, but the top one is major gift program for an annual campaign.
Fabulous. 25% for an annual campaign, 17% for capital, 17% for programs and special projects. 8% of you are looking at endowment campaigns, 11% comprehensive. This is very interesting. It's really spread throughout our group. We've got some that aren't currently planning, but we're happy you're on the phone so that you can get ready when the time comes. So thank you, Lucinda. It's really fun to see where people are coming from. Thank you all for doing that. So let's delve into the 4 fundamentals, shall we? So, as we discovered just now through the poll, campaigns come in all shapes and sizes, including the number of people involved, the dollar amount raised, the targeted audiences that you wish to reach, among many other elements. So matter the campaign size or the goal, there are really 4 things you need to be successful. You need an aspirational vision that's unifying, that is clear and compelling message that you will convey to stakeholders and potential donors. You need unique selling propositions as well as the perception that a gift will truly make a difference. Second, you need infrastructure. You need a timeline. You need a plan. You need a process. We're going to talk more about all of the things that go into that. Third, leadership. Leadership establishes momentum. It demonstrates the leadership that is involved with your campaign, or whether it's annual or capital, are a group of people that demonstrate passion, commitment, and a willingness to invest in your future. Ambassadors, they're ambassadors to the mission. And finally, you need prospects. You need to have a list of prospective donors who will potentially support your effort. So identifying prospects who believe in your mission, your constituencies who are motivated, it involves stewardship and cultivation, and we need to make sure that a donor feels that his or her gift has truly made a difference and is deeply appreciated. That is what is at the heart of stewardship. So we're going to start with our very first item here, vision and case, and I'm going to turn it over to Alexis.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much, everyone. So Karen spoke a little bit about an organization's journey to achieve vision. With that grand outcome established, it is time to build your case for support. Part of articulating a meaningful case is to consider the philanthropic value proposition. Just to clarify, this is not a document or a paragraph or a case statement. It is an overarching, cohesive approach to communication that works in many different settings to describe the value to donors of supporting your organization. For example, an elevator pitch used by your board and/or leadership, donor solicitations, and then into your case for support. An impactful philanthropic value proposition will explain how donors support of your organization will bring benefit to the community. It will instill a sense of purpose that the donor could not achieve without you. Clearly communicate who you are, what meaningful work you do, and why existing and prospective donors should support your organization. When a strong philanthropic value proposition is lacking, the prospective donor is left asking questions like, why does this matter? How does this work provide measurable impact? What actual difference will this make? How does this relate to the organization's vision, and more? The Alford Group encourages clients to be bold in creating their philanthropic value proposition, articulating the benefit and opportunity to be laser focused in this articulation and help you differentiate your organization's work from others. When describing the benefit, clearly express the positive outcome of your work. Paint a picture of the organization's preferred future in words and images, and demonstrate the urgency around this happening now. Use numbers and statistics to demonstrate this impact. Weave together storytelling and testimonials to convey your organization's value in the words of clients, donors, and others. When considering the opportunity for engagement, never overlook a call to action. Provide a SMART opportunity for donor engagement, and that's SMART with capital letters. That's specific, measurable, achievable, results-focused, and time-bound. Customize engagement opportunities for major donors and segment opportunities for other donor constituencies. What do we mean by laser-focused? Well, in your communications, be strategic and intentional in your value proposition. Use clear, simple, straightforward language. Be forward-thinking. Be transparent, positive, and hopeful, but concise and impact theme and consistent in all messages moving forward. It can be difficult to differentiate our work, but it is important to highlight your organization's uniqueness while describing how your organization is different from similar organizations. Never disparage other organizations, of course, but always celebrate your organization's successes. Be a champion for your organization's work and the people at your organization who do this great work. With your philanthropic value proposition in hand and the end goal in mind, it is time to create or modify the organization's case for support. A case for support will be an external document that provides the reasons why an organization both needs and merits philanthropic support. A successful case statement will describe the project, State the case for the project's aim, purpose, and mission, articulating why change must occur. It will illustrate how the change will occur and how the organization plans to sustain or maintain the project to maximize impact on the community economically, socially, artistically, spiritually, and/or historically for today and tomorrow. Demonstrate to the donor how their support of this project will directly impact the community and how the success will be measured. In building your case for support, it's quite a process, and it might begin in a feasibility study, which hopefully you may have had the opportunity to test your messaging through stakeholder interviews and/or staff and leadership work groups, and through campaign planning, you are now just refining. But if the case development has a fresh start with no prior version, it is worth considering a process that involves your board, a selection of close donors, friends and partners, as well as colleagues. Organizational buy-in is critical to the success and consistency of messaging moving forward. And while building your case for support, keep all source documentation, the budgets, the lists, the narratives, and testimonies. These come together to create what we call the internal case, or Karen terms the development team's toolbox. This meaningful internal case will be referenced again and again as your team crafts specific messaging for specific donors. In summary, a case should do the following. It should inform, inspire, excite, uplift, motivate. It should incite donors to action and involvement. It should instill the urgency of why now, why this is necessary, why their funds are needed now. And it should invite their support, interest, and dedication. So we have discussed the first of 4 key fundamentals, and I'm going to continue into infrastructure. Infrastructure is an incredibly important piece of any functioning development office, but elements are easy to relegate to the back burner when staff and resources are tight. Ultimately, when preparing and launching a campaign, your organization needs to ask the questions. Is your organization committed and prepared to undertake this fundraising campaign? Will your development team have the resources it needs to be successful? And if no, is there a plan to build this capacity through the campaign? So much of this to-do list should be identified well ahead of launching a campaign. And in fact, the Alford Group elevates readiness in each and every feasibility study and encourages clients to simultaneously build up and increase support to infrastructure as early in a fundraising campaign as possible. But it is always healthy to reevaluate and consider this, whether you're in a campaign or not, for the success of your development department. Questions that the development team might ask of the organization, or the organization should be asking in general, might be, how much are we looking to raise? What is our investment and the budget for this campaign? What is the cost of raising funds to achieve this goal? How many staff do you have to organize volunteers and to communicate to constituents? Do we have a timeline for the campaign? What are the specific steps that are needed for us to take in order to accomplish the goal? How will this fit in within the allotted timeline? Does the development team or our senior leaders have the ability to respond to questions and address issues? Are our donor files updated? Have they been reviewed for accuracy, hopefully, on at least a quarterly basis? Is your database prepared, and is your organization's approach to portfolio management established and clear for all relationship managers? Are our processes clear and concise? Do our staff and volunteer leaders understand our processes? Are thank you letters sent promptly and donor recognition updated quarterly? Will this campaign include naming opportunities, and are we prepared for that? Ultimately, how will goals be measured? How will impact be measured? If the campaign is an institution-wide effort, are all internal and external stakeholders and partners on board, engaged, identified? So in summary, this captures capacity. To be at capacity, an organization will ideally have the resources, talent, skills, and policies, procedures, and systems in place for all 5 of the elements on this slide. If not, going into the campaign, a plan to add elements and resources will hopefully be in place. Otherwise, an organization risks the campaign running over the established timeline, staff burnout, program fatigue, and other less savory consequences. As an example of how internal support systems and infrastructure directly tie to the work of a development office, this pipeline demonstrates optimal donor and prospect development. I feel that this really clearly demonstrates the underlying need for established resources, timelines, roles and responsibilities, data operations, portfolio review and stewardship. All of this is impacted by an organization's readiness, preparedness, and ultimately the infrastructure. So now we have discussed infrastructure and process as our second fundamental, and I am excited to turn it back over to Karen, who will go into leadership.
Thank you, Alexis. That last slide is so relevant, I think, in terms of how we look at those 5 elements for optimal donor pipeline development, and that those of you who are, whether you're in a major gift effort for your annual fund or a capital campaign, this is just a terrific checklist of what needs to be in place. So thank you for that, and I'm very excited to talk about my favorite topic, leadership. So at the Alford Group, those of you who were on the call last week may have heard this because this is our mantra. We often tell our clients that there really are 3 important factors that need to be in place for a successful campaign. And they are leadership, leadership, and leadership. Seriously, though, all of the components need to be in place, but leadership is truly the most important. Volunteer involvement and engagement is key to success. These individuals who are dedicated to your mission and project and their willingness to open doors to key community relationships will ensure that you will be successful. One of the key motivators, many of you know this already, but one of the key motivators for donors is that they have an established relationship with your organization and or are introduced by someone they know and respect. When we say people give to people, it means that the volunteers who are engaged, who will provide their own support and will be key ambassadors for your organization and campaign are what will make it successful. Those who have meaningful involvement with you and your organization will provide their own support and be key ambassadors. That is just so important. Volunteers with key linkages in the community also need to be identified, cultivated, and then ultimately invited to join your campaign cabinet or your major gifts committee. And finally, our job as fundraisers is to make volunteer engagement fun, rewarding, and easy. With sincerity and consistency, staff leadership needs to keep good people meaningfully involved. We often say that the people who we are attracting to our major gifts committee and to our capital campaign cabinets are the busiest, most influential people in our communities, and we have to make sure that we are using their time wisely, efficiently, and keeping them meaningfully involved in your organization and the campaign. Next, as we talk about training and what the board role is with a campaign, I have to say, in my 30+ years of fundraising, I've never seen an entire board embrace the idea of being a fundraiser. So I'll just put that out there. If you're saying my board doesn't like to fundraise, you're not alone. But it is important that they understand the fundraising and development process. They need to be knowledgeable about their role, and they need to be, and your expectations as an organization of them in the process. What's really important is that your board is representative of your community and the constituencies that you wish to reach. Because every board member, regardless of their role in actually asking for a gift, every single board member is an ambassador for your organization and your campaign. As we talk about building leadership, you know, one of the things that we have learned, successful campaigns that the Alford Group's been a part of, involve community leaders and major donors who will actively participate in the fundraising for a limited time frame. So as you build your core volunteer team, who will work closely with your staff to identify, cultivate, and solicit leadership gifts, it takes focus and diligence. Most often, it's members of your feasibility study who have become engaged and who have established ownership who end up being your best candidates for your campaign cabinet. And then those individuals who have been part of your campaign become your best candidates for a major gifts effort in your annual fundraising. So the individuals who will work with you to establish relationships with your top 50 prospects for major gifts is what is really important. Whether these are individuals you've met through the feasibility study, the feasibility study committee, or people who have been your major donors, and those volunteers and board members who aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and help you identify, cultivate, and solicit. Those are the people you want to focus on. The next slide really gives you a sense about leadership profiles. Next slide. This slide is actually very interesting, and we use this oftentimes in working with boards because regardless of a board member's willingness to be a quote-unquote fundraiser, we find that these profiles are actually a really great way to engage your board into where they might see themselves helping. So some people might identify as a connector. They know how to work a room. They know how to ask questions and listen for opportunities. This also is an ambassador to your organization. They talk to people about your organization. They will often be the ones who volunteer to greet people at events. They'll help you identify and generate a list of supporters. They enjoy bringing people together, so they're connectors. And every board has a group of connectors. The next sort of profile is the person who's the storyteller. As we know, some people are really good at this, and they are the ones who can really talk about your mission and your impact in a compelling way. They can bring the work of your organization to life through their articulation of how it's making a difference, and also through their own personal stories about how your organization is changing the lives of the people you serve. The third profile is truly the visionary. They're the strategic thinker. They know how to best maximize and position the organization. They talk the language of return and investment. They're all about ROI, and they help donors understand how their support creates value for the organization and the community. And finally, we have the closers. They're the ones who really will ask. They will understand the process of engaging potential donors, determining the best way to make this ask, and they enjoy meeting with donors. They understand we're going to be overcoming objections, but they're also willing to share their own story, and they're willing to ask donors to join them in supporting the organization. So when you are creating a campaign cabinet or a major gifts committee for your annual fund, you really need people who have all of these characteristics. However, your board might really see themselves as a connector or a storyteller. But sometimes what will happen is that as the campaign starts to evolve and unfold, people will become closers if they have an opportunity to participate in an ask, and that's really exciting when you can see, when you can watch volunteers evolve into becoming a closer and asking for gifts. So the next fundamental is we need prospects. If we don't have prospects, we don't have anyone to ask. So there are some questions to ask yourself as an organization about what needs to be in place. And a lot of this ties to what you've heard already. There's the unifying and aspirational vision. You have board and staff synergy. You have strategic imperatives that reflect your strategic plan. And you have clearly defined what the outcome will be when you achieve your goal. How can you articulate what that looks like when you are successful with your major gifts effort? So within the donor's point of view, you need to have other things that are involved from their point of view. They need to be in alignment with your values as an organization. They have to have the ability to self-select through engagement, a feeling of stewardship, a perception that their gift is truly important, that they also need a perception of legacy with lasting impact and philanthropic reciprocity. So donors are motivated by a variety of reasons, but ultimately they are going to be aligned with your mission and your values, and they're going to have the propensity to be philanthropic. So as we look at this next slide, this is a tool, and by the way, I saw that there were some questions. You will receive these slides along with the recording, so I won't read through all of this, but I love this slide, and it's one that we use often, which are the 7 I's of fundraising, starting with identifying who the prospect could potentially be. They may not know very much about your organization yet, but we know that they would have a propensity to the mission and the cause that you're supporting. The next step is to invite them in, to get involved, to take a tour, to learn a little bit more about your organization. And then over time, you're starting to inform them more and more about the uniqueness that you are providing to the community, and it takes place over time. So again, if you ask someone to support you when you've just identified them, you might get a small gift, and this is the difference really between an annual fund and a major gifts effort, that you really need to get to the point where they are feeling informed and interested, that this initiative is important to them. It's important to them, to their values. It's important to them because they're asking the right questions, they're offering suggestions, and it's really clear that they're ready to become more involved. By the time they get involved, hopefully you're able to attract them to joining a committee or to providing advice and insight, co-hosting a gathering, that kind of thing. That involvement helps them to become engaged and ultimately become ready to invest. And so when they truly have passed through these phases, and for some people it takes longer than others, so patience is a virtue, but by the time they're ready to invest, they're ready to invest in a significant way, with a major gift, not just a checkbook gift or a quick gift, but something that's very thoughtful that will make a significant impact. So as we are in a lead gift phase for either a major gift annual fund or a capital campaign, it's still the top 10 rule. Your top 10 supporters will provide 90% of your funding. If you go back through your own donor records and you look at that, you go, my goodness, this is true. We've gotten 90% of our funds from 10% of our donors. And so in a major gift campaign, that's what we focus on. And that's why in that early effort, with that swoosh you saw at the beginning, we're really focused on our top supporters in that first quiet leadership gift of the phase, gift phase of a campaign. So it really comes down to who are the top 50 prospects who could potentially make a leadership or principal gift. Well, it starts with those who are closest, who your major donors who supported you in the past, who of those donors are your best prospects. They may be individuals who have given you a gift of $500 every year for the last 10 years, and you haven't had a chance or you haven't gone to them to ask them for something special, but they've really shown an amazing commitment to you by making a major gift, and this might be a time to do a little more research and say, oh my goodness, this person, if we do this right, could give us a gift of $50,000 if we ask them in the right way. So who of your donors are your best prospects? And then based on your mission, your services, and the benefits that you provide to your community, who else would be interested in your organization based on their philanthropic involvement in other organizations within your community? And then your natural constituencies, clearly. Students, alumni, grateful patients, artists, teachers, those constituencies who are affected by your organization and by your mission are going to have an affinity and a propensity to give. So when we look at the next slide here, again, there's a lot of text on this, but really I think the key to this is that The key to your major gift program is planning. From the very beginning, your fundraising success relies on your strategy and relationship management. Supporters are not major donors by chance. It's the hard work you put into each stage of the prospecting process that achieves a strategic outcome. The moves management process is central to accurately forecasting your prospect pipeline. So these 6 stages are what you need to really look at to convert a prospect into a major donor. So again, you'll get these slides, and it starts with the identification, the research, the strategy, cultivating, solicitation, and really important, stewardship. Once that gift comes in, you need to make sure you keep those donors close, that you're always keeping them informed so that they continue to come back and continue to renew their major gifts to your organization. The next slide is one that I really like, which just is a bullseye of who is going to support you. And sometimes this is really important to show to board members, because they'll say, well, I think we need to go to all the corporations in town and ask them to support our organization because they should. Well, are they connected to our mission? Who are we connected to within our board? It's not to say you shouldn't go to that outer circle with the right relationships, but it really is the core of the people who are close to your mission. And those are your board members, your former board, your current donors, your former donors, and select friends who are introduced to you through any of those other individual constituencies. And then you go to your outer circle, or your next circle out, and then the general public. So we're not going to start with someone in the community who has significant wealth, who's supporting everything that, for instance, Bill Gates. If you know Bill Gates' family, then great, someone could make that connection, but you're really going to have the best luck with the folks who are already close to you. So these are the folks you want to start with as you identify your top prospects. Next, what we're talking about is individualizing and individual strategies around each prospect. When we go into a campaign with our clients, we say, it's not one size fits all. It really is an individual strategy for each individual based on who they know, what they know about our organization, what they care about, and that strategy will be specific to that person. So we're going to be thinking about that person first. What is their giving history and past gift designations with our organization? Who knows them and who has access to them? How strong is our relationship with them? And what is their perceived potential in terms of their donation? They may have a high capacity rating, but they have a long way to go to be close in terms of propensity to give. So when you get to the point of actually asking, then you need to think about what is their current knowledge of your case for support and what will truly inspire them personally to do the extraordinary. And it's not just what, but it's who. So when the cultivation activity is taking place, who has that strongest relationship, who will invite them in, and what is the message? Because we've listened to them throughout our relationship with them. We know what they're interested in. How do we inspire them to do something truly extraordinary? As we're managing our prospect list, these are little nuts and bolts, but I think it's important to put this out there, that you need to have a rating session with your key volunteers. Once you've established your major gifts committee or your cabinet for your campaign, you're going to put a list out in front of them, and you're going to ask them to tell us who they know. Who do they know, and what do we think their capacity is? Now, it's not necessarily a list that comes from thin air, although there may be some names that are added because of all of those other qualifications that I mentioned earlier, but typically they're going to be people who are already supporting you and who are already close to you. You're going to establish a tracking system, a moves report, contact report, and what's really important is that you start slowly with a small number and don't bite off more than you can handle. That's why in the early leadership gift phase of our major gifts or capital, I say top 50, because if you really handle those 50 with the capacity to get you halfway to your goal, If you do that right and you start slowly with that small number, that diligence and that focus will pay off. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have specific strategies around each of your prospects, and you'll make matches based on what you hear from them about what their greatest area of interest is within your organization or within your campaign. Being disciplined and evaluating regularly is really important. Constantly evaluate your portfolio and the efforts to engage each prospect. By the time you get to the community engagement phase, which is the final phase, there may be specific channels that you could reach out to engage the broader community, inviting them to participate. So you will still be continuing your major gifts effort all the way through, but as you broaden your effort, you'll think about where do people respond better to mail, or how about your staff campaign, a memorial campaign, special events, how are you using social media, and finally, always integrating planned giving, no matter what you're doing, into your engagement process so that people know that your organization is worthy of leaving you in their estate planning as you plan ahead. So those are our 4, but there actually is a 5th fundamental that we're going to add, and that is fun. Remember that the major gifts effort has to be fun for the internal team and the volunteers who are engaged. That is why joyfulness is one of the Alford Group's core values. Campaigns are serious work. Lift and significant organizational resources and effort are required. Building fun into the equation allows room for greater staff involvement, buy-in, more creativity, and ultimately more positive energy, which equates into success. So that concludes our 4 with the 5th fundamental added in at the end, and we have time for questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Karen. We have a number of questions that have come in, and just a reminder, if you have a question, simply use the Q&A chat function on your screen, and all of the panelists here, myself and Alexis and Karen, will be able to see your question, and we're going to take as many as we can right now for the remainder of the time that we have. So our first question, I think, is a very good, thoughtful question. So how do you successfully transition campaign donors into annual fund donors? So I think a lot of organizations struggle with this one.
That is a wonderful question, and I actually have a really good example to share that will illustrate that, because a lot of times organizations are concerned that a capital campaign will somehow degrade or interfere with their annual effort, and that is just not the case. Particularly in the leadership gift phase, you're really focusing on your top 10 prospects, and so, or your top 10% of your donors, your top 50 prospects, and so perhaps as you get to the community phase of the campaign, you might be asking your donors to participate in both efforts. However, I have to say that capital campaigns elevate awareness to a great extent for your annual fund. And my example that I always like to share with my clients and also with my class that I teach was when I was with the Seattle Symphony. I was had the honor of serving as the Director of Development and Capital Campaign when the Seattle Symphony was in the $159 million campaign to raise the money to build Benaroya Hall. And that was some time ago. And we successfully completed the campaign. And at the time the campaign started, the annual fund for the symphony was bringing in around $3 million a year. 2 years after the campaign concluded, the annual fund was bringing in $8.5 million a year. Now, I know that they are doing even more than that now, but that was a significant growth period, which was directly tied to the campaign. And the reason for that was that both the volunteer sites and the donor sites were raised significantly. People made gifts to that campaign that they never thought they could make. And They really stretched. They made $25,000 gifts where perhaps in the past they've been making a $3,500 annual gift, and they were able to make $25,000 or $50,000 gifts to the campaign. So when the campaign concluded, our team at the Symphony put our heads together and came up with a plan to establish a new major gifts effort for the annual fund, which we called the Maestro Circle. And what that was a $10,000 a year annual gift. And when we first came up with the concept, there were donors and board members who were very concerned that that was way too aggressive. And what I had said was, all I need are 2 or 3 volunteers who are ready to step up, who agree this is a good idea, and that they will do it, and that they will be on this newly formed Maestro Circle committee. Then let's give it a try. And that's what happened. These 4, actually we have 5 volunteers and major donors who said, absolutely, I'm in, this is a no-brainer. And they identified people who had given major gifts to the campaign, who had either were at the end of their pledge period or had concluded their pledge period, and they identified people they would talk to and say, will you join me to be part of the Maestro Circle for our annual fund and make a $10,000 a year annual gift. And what was fabulous about it was that by the end of 2.5 years, we had over 100 people doing it. So it was amazing. There were very special benefits that were important to people, and that was part of it, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a huge success in building our annual major gifts effort because of the momentum that was established during the campaign.
That's excellent. What a great example, and just a really good point that the campaign can help build momentum into your annual fund and not necessarily take away from your annual fund, which is great. Our next question is about the case. So going back to the first fundamental that we talked about, and actually there are a number of questions related to that that I'm going to kind of sort of lump together, but participants are asking about the vehicle for the case and what that looks like. So is it a Word document? Is it a multimedia platform? What tools are you using to deliver the case?
Well, first I recommend that be creative and have fun with drafting and creating your case for support, but it would be most impactful if you thought about the specific audience that you intend to reach. And so a narrative document with some compelling imagery and some meaningful metrics and or measurable impact is terrific if that's what will most resonate with your audience. Infographics, graphic representations of your data and your vision are terrific also. Maybe it's video content that captures your mission and your services. Some organizations have really sensitive information. Their clients and their constituency and the work they do cannot be broadly shared for confidentiality reasons or other sensitive issues. So sometimes video might be the most compelling way to demonstrate the mission and the impact in a safe and protective way. Spark decks, smart web interface, it all depends on where you are in the process and how you want to reach constituencies. And I also just want to stress that no matter what you choose, consider and reflect on your language to be sure that it's dynamic, it's clear, it's compelling, you are transparent in your approach and in what you are promising to do, that you have measurable impact as part of that plan. And I'll just reference back to the SMART in capitals goal. It's one of my favorite acronyms. Specific, measurable, achievable, results-focused, time-bound. No matter what vehicle you choose to implement, or multiple vehicles at various times in your campaign or fundraising efforts, please keep that in mind and strive to be smart.
Excellent. That's great. I'm going to keep us moving just because we have so many questions. Our next question is about prospects, and so this is another one of our 4 key elements. And Karen, when you were talking, you sort of brainstormed and mentioned different types of prospects and talked about starting close and building out. So the question is, what about current and former employees as prospects? Would you consider those? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I didn't touch on that, so I'm glad that question came up, because there certainly are prospects, and depending on the organization, we have seen that some organizations are extremely successful with a staff campaign during a capital campaign, and others are vehemently opposed. So I can say that and then some are in between. So it really depends on the culture of the organization as to whether or not this is an opportunity for you. We encourage it because it is a way to help to build that philanthropic culture within the organization. If everyone who works there understands that their gift is really important, an important part of the success of your campaign, and we just really stress that it's not about the size of the gift, it's about the level of participation. Just as we would with a board, not all board members can make major gifts, but it's so important that 100% of your board makes a gift to the campaign. It's a great message to get out to the staff that that they too, that their gifts are valued and would be an important part of the campaign. One thing that I would offer that I've seen works better than the other way is that it not be led by the development office. That if there is a staff campaign, that it be led by either project managers or other members of the staff who are not typically the ones asking for gifts. It's a way to involve them in asking, and it's also a way to not have the rest of the staff always see the development office as the one that has to be the only one to ask. So I think it's great.
Good, great. And so this next question is sort of similar to, or relevant, related to prospecting. But the question is, do you, Karen or Alexis, have any suggestions for getting board members and or others to be motivated during a peer-to-peer campaign?
Do you want to take that from shall we both try it?
Sure. I'll just start by saying, if that's all right, that one thing I would recommend really early in terms of building your board members and others into enlisting them to be supporters on behalf of your solicitors on behalf of your organizations, and bring in the supporters, is make sure they understand the full trajectory of what the organization hopes to accomplish with peer-to-peer fundraising. Make sure they completely understand and have early buy-in into the process. And in terms of momentum, creating early success stories that are then broadly shared. So if we're let's say just with a board, for example, if the board is being asked to participate in peer-to-peer fundraising on behalf of the organization, make sure they have the resources they need to be successful, make sure they understand what they're doing, make sure they feel comfortable and are engaged with the roles they have, but then also share successes and have some early successes potentially even planted. Maybe there's a match, maybe there's a really great solicitation that you already had on the docs that could be applied to this, and perhaps a board member helped you with that, and you have an early story to share as an example of success. Those are ways to start that momentum. Karen, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I agree with you. That's excellent, Alexis. The only thing I might add is that, like I said earlier, it starts with just a few who are willing. If it's only coming from the staff or the campaign council, it's not going to have the same effect as if it is being initiated by a peer. So initially, we need to find a few champions who are willing to be the leaders on asking their other peer board members to join, and they need to be willing to be trained and coached along the way, and then be comfortable demonstrating that it is something that anyone can do, and that they're asking other board members to join them as their peers. So it has to start somewhere. You need some champions to start out, like you said, and then hopefully it grows from there.
Great, that's great. I think that's really, really helpful. There was another question kind of in this same boat, and it's, I mean, it's very much related, and it's a little bit broader, so maybe not specific to peer-to-peer fundraising or prospecting, but do you have any additional tips in addition to what you all just mentioned for getting the board more involved and or excited about a campaign? So maybe they have reservations in general. Do you have any tips for sort of building momentum from your leadership team?
Well, I'll just start and say that when we are working with an organization on a campaign as council, that is very much a focus of the services that we provide to an organization, is how to get the board motivated. And that can take it can take several different combined efforts. It starts with educating them on what a campaign looks like and and being really clear about what their role is as an ambassador. And then it is getting them to actually articulate why this campaign is important. So through a series of, oftentimes it'll be through a board retreat where there's actually some hands-on getting the board members to actually articulate it themselves. The more they can become comfortable with talking about the need and the impact, the easier it will be for them to just talk it up. And if we can get them to talk it up with their friends, then hopefully, if there's an interest with folks they're talking to, they will invite them in. And then one thing will lead to the next. But they have to really feel comfortable with what a campaign looks like, how it's run, how will we get from point A to point Z. It just seems so overwhelming. And for board members who've never been through a campaign, we have to remember that this is the first time for them, and we need to walk them through the steps and show them what is involved and how they can help, and then help them help us.
And that's exactly it, isn't it, Karen? I'd love to just add that there's a few other tricks or tactics that can be applied along the way, certainly in terms of engaging a board in a fundraising effort, setting a goal for the board as a whole. Oftentimes that might be a participation goal, because a truly diverse board won't necessarily all be able to equally make a gift amount at the same level or more. So a participation goal can be really helpful. Making sure they feel part of the celebrations. I'm really big on that, but I think it's really important to keep people energized and happy in a campaign, especially those who are helping to do the work. And then if we just look back at that leadership profile slide, one of my favorite pieces about having a board or your committee, your volunteer leadership self-identify their role is that it can help you keep them accountable for where they identified. And so if they're willing to, for example, be a connector, you could loop back to them in an appropriate amount of time and say, you self-identified as a connector in our effort, and we're so grateful for that. And when can I follow up with you on your planning a small house party, or hosting friends at a lunch and learn at your office? I think creating a really easy path for engagement for your board members, for your volunteer leadership, will make a big difference in keeping them involved.
Excellent.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. We have time for just one last question. And this question is, are there any specific good times or bad times to run a campaign? A good one to end on.
Well, that's a great question. I think, again, as organizations consider big campaigns, they have to be very clear about why this is urgent now. So it really, when we talk about CASE, it's not just that it's a nice to have, but why is it important now? Because I think there's always going to be ups and downs in our economy, in our political environment, other organizations that are in campaigns, all of those things that could potentially provide headwinds to success. So if the need is truly urgent and necessary, we just have to be able to overcome those objections and help volunteers and donors understand why this is urgent now. So I guess that's kind of a roundabout question, that there's always going to be a good time and a bad time in one way or another, I think.
Well, and I know I would agree and say it's always a good time, except if you don't have the infrastructure in place.
That's right.
Let's just close on that note.
Or the four fundamentals.
Exactly. Great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Karen, and thank you to everyone for joining today. We hope that you've picked up some ideas and tips that will be helpful as you navigate your campaign planning and implementation. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is part of the Alford Group's 40th anniversary webinar series, and there are 2 more webinars in this series, both this month. You can see them listed here for you, so please join us. All this information is on our website, and again, these webinars are free, so please join us. Keep an eye out for an email from us later today. We're going to be sending you a recording of today's presentation, as well as the full slide deck. This email will also invite you to complete a very short survey to tell us how we did, and by short, I mean it's 4 questions, so it's quite short. If you didn't have a chance, or if we didn't have a chance to answer your question today, and you have questions now or in the future, please contact us. So our final slide, our thank you slide, has our emails on here. Please send us a note. We'd love to hear from you and how we can partner together in the future. So thank you again for joining. We hope to see you on the next webinar, and this concludes today's session. We will now disconnect. Have a really great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.